Lesson 15, Third Declension, continued, the Ablative of specification. Welcome back to Lenny's Latin class. Today we're on page 47, and in this lesson we're going to cover more about the third declension, and we're going to learn yet another way to use the ablative case. So let's jump right into section 140. Here in section 140, the authors of the book want to talk about certain nouns of the third declension which have a nominative singular form ending with the letter S, or with an S sound. Okay, let's read what they say here. They say, nominative singular, some nouns of the third declension form the nominative singular by adding S to the base. Okay, what do they mean when they say by adding S to the base? What's the base? Well, the base, also known as the genitive stem, is the root of the word, the stem, and we can find the genitive stem by taking the genitive singular form of the noun and removing the ending. Okay? It doesn't matter what you call it. You can call it the base, you can call it the stem, you can call it the genitive stem. It doesn't matter. It's still the same thing. It's the stem of the genitive singular form of the noun. Okay? So the authors of the book here want to make us aware that, as they say, some nouns of the third declension form the nominative singular by adding S to the base. And they continue on. They say the base may end in B, P, D, T, C, or G. Now they're going to tell us some of the patterns that they've noticed with these particular nouns. They say that bases ending in D or T drop these letters in the nominative. And they give us a couple of examples here, like the word lapis, which means stone. Okay, the genitive singular form is lapidis. That's L-A-P-I-D-I-S. If we remove the ending from the genitive singular, that leaves us with L-A-P-I-D, lapid. So the whole point of this paragraph is saying that some Latin nouns are formed by adding the letter S to the base. So if we take L-A-P-I-D, lapid, and add the letter S, we get lapids, L-A-P-I-D-S. But they're telling us here that bases ending in D or T drop these letters in the nominative. Okay, so in the nominative, we're going to get rid of the D in lapids, and that leaves us with lapis. Okay? Let's cover that one more time. Lapis means stone. That's the nominative singular form. Lapidis is the genitive singular. We remove the ending of the genitive singular. That's the is, and that leaves us with the genitive stem, which is L-A-P-I-D. So we have the genitive stem. We add the letter S, and we get lapids, L-A-P-I-D-S. But in Latin, when that happens, the D will go away, and you'll just get lapis. So as you're memorizing the nominative and genitive, as you ought to do, as any good Latin student ought to do, whenever learning a new Latin noun, you'll say lapis, lapidis. You'll learn the nominative and genitive singular forms. Same thing happens with the noun miles. Miles means soldier. Militis is the genitive singular, M-I-L-I-T-I-S, militis. So if we take the genitive singular, militis, and we remove the is, we get the genitive stem. That's M-I-L-I-T. So if we add the letter S, we get milits. And as they just said a moment ago, when this happens, letters like D and T go away. They get dropped. So we end up with miles as the nominative singular. They go on to say that bases, or genitive stems, in C or G have X in the nominative for CS and GS. That is, in place of CS and GS. And they give us an example here, the noun dux, D-U-X. Dux means leader, and the nominative singular is ducis, D-U-C-I-S. So if we take the genitive singular form, ducus, and we remove the is ending, we get duc as the genitive stem. If we add the letter s, we get dux, ducs. But the ancient Romans didn't want to spell it that way. They wanted to spell it with the letter x. The letter x is what we call a double consonant. It includes kind of a K sound and an S sound. So when you say dux, D-U-X, you get the K sound that would have happened with the letter C, and you get the S sound, so dux. The X takes the place of the C and the S. Same thing happens not only with CS, but with GS. So the word rex means king, and the genitive singular form is regis. Okay, so if we take regis, the genitive singular form, and remove the is, we get reg. If you add the letter s, you get regs, and that gs gets converted into an x. So you get rex. So this may be kind of technical for you. To me, it's kind of interesting. I enjoy linguistics, which is really what this is. And before we leave this section, I'd like to point out to you one more linguistic item. Look at the sentence where it says on the third line of section 140, it says, the base may end in B, P, D, T, C, or G. I'd like to point out that all of these letters have something in common. In linguistics, these letters of the alphabet are called stops, or they're also called mutes, M-U-T-E-S. Why are they called stops? Well, they're called stops because the flow of air through the mouth stops during the pronunciation of that letter. For example, if you say time, T-I-M-E, when you pronounce the letter T at the beginning of the word time, your tongue is closing off the front of your mouth, and the air is sort of building up inside until you release it. Time. Okay, so by virtue of the fact that your tongue is stopping the air, well, that's why it's called a stop, because the air is being stopped. Same thing with the letter C, which in Latin is a hard C, like a K sound. If you say the word cat, same thing happens. While you're starting out the word, you're going to say a hard C sound, a K sound. So you close off the back of your mouth, and the air starts to build up, K, until you release it. So again, that's called a stop. Same with P and B. If you say popcorn, again, your lips are closing and stopping the air until you release them. One more fun linguistic thing to point out is that each of these 6 stops, or mutes, has a partner. Okay? B and P are partners. With one of the 2 partners, your vocal cords vibrate as you say the sound. With the other one, your vocal cords do not vibrate as you say the sound. In linguistics, that's called voiced and unvoiced. Okay? So when you say the letter P, 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 your vocal cords do not vibrate. When you say B, however, your vocal cords do vibrate. B. That's the only difference between a P and a B. So therefore, P and B are really the same movement of the mouth, only one is voiced and the other is unvoiced. So the letter P is really just an unvoiced B, and the letter B is really just a voiced P. Okay, so B and P are partners. One is voiced, one is unvoiced. Same thing with D and T. They really are partners. They're the same mouth movement, but one is voiced and one is unvoiced. Duh, duh. The letter D is voiced because your vocal cords are vibrating as you say it. T, t. The letter T is unvoiced because your vocal cords are not vibrating as you say it. But with both T and D, t, d, t, d, your tongue is making the same air-releasing movement. So T and D are the same, just that one is voiced and the other is unvoiced. And lastly, C and G, they form yet another pair of voiced and unvoiced. Remember that in Latin, the letter C is always a hard C. It's always going to make a K sound. Unless, that is, you're using ecclesiastical pronunciation, in which case there are a few other rules regarding the letter C. But anyway, with both a C and G, you cut off the air in the back of your mouth and you release it like that. When you say a K sound or a hard C, it's unvoiced. Your vocal cords are not vibrating, so you get K. When you say the letter G, your vocal cords are vibrating, so you get G. But besides that, the C and the G make the same mouth movement. So a hard C is really just an unvoiced G, and a G is just a voiced hard C. And so this is the whole reason why these letters get dropped from these third declension nouns, is because they are stops. And when you have a stop followed by an S, that's when the stop goes away and gets dropped. Okay, enough linguistics for now. Let's move on to section 141. The authors of the book are suggesting that you do some memorization work, which I think is very valuable. Get accustomed further to the endings of the third declension. That will be very helpful to you. And as I always suggest, try to make sentences with them and practice them orally. Speak the language. Don't just write them out. That's fine too if you want to write them out, but also make up sentences in which you actually use the nouns in their different forms. And as you express thoughts and say things in the language, you'll find that it's much easier to remember the morphology of the nouns. And by morphology, I mean the different forms that they can take, the different endings. Okay, let's move on now to section 142 and discuss our new vocabulary for this lesson. First we have numerus, numeri, a masculine noun of the second declension, which means number. Related English words are numeral and numerous. Auctoritas, auctoritatis, is a feminine noun of the third declension, which means influence. A related English word is authority. Next is civitas, civitatis, a feminine noun of the third declension, which means state or tribe. Related English words are words like civil and civilian. Next is lex legis, another feminine noun of the third declension that means law. From the genitive form, you can see that we have related English words like legal. Next we have pax pacus, another feminine noun of the third declension that means peace. A related English word is pacify. Next is miles militis, a masculine noun of the third declension, which means soldier. A related English word is military. Next we have princeps, principis, a masculine noun of the third declension, which means chief. Actually, the English word prince is related to this Latin word, and other words like principal. Next we have someone's name, and that's dumnorix. The genitive is dumnorigis. That's from the third declension, and this person is a Gallic tribesman. We're going to read about him in Caesar's Gallic Wars. Same thing for the next word, which is orgetorix. Orgetorigus is the genitive singular. We're going to read about him soon as we begin to read Caesar's Gallic Wars. The next word is virtus, virtutis. Interestingly, this word is related to the Latin word vir, which means man, but it's grammatically feminine, and it means virtue or valor, as in valor expressed in combat, literally manliness. Next we have caput, capitis, which means head. That's a neuter noun of the third declension. So the nominative plural would be capita. We have related English words like capital, and also chapter, I believe, is related to this word. Next we have apud. That's a preposition. It takes the accusative and it means among. It can also mean other things like near or with or at. And finally, we have a verb here, con woco. You can see that's simply the verb woco, which means call, with the prefix con. The prefix con means together or with, so add it all up and you get call together. A related English word would be convocation. Okay, let's move on to section 143, our model sentences, and let's examine how these sentences will demonstrate the ablative of specification. Let's look at the first model sentence, but the English part of it, the English translation. It says, the Gauls and Belgians differ in language and laws. Sometimes in English we say a sentence like this with the word regard or regards. We'll say things like, the Gauls and Belgians differ with regard to language and laws. Or we might use the word respect. We might say, the Gauls and Belgians differ with respect to language and laws. Regardless of how you say it, you're trying to say the same thing in each sentence. You're saying they differ in this area or in this way. Okay, so in Latin, if we say a sentence like that, then the part about in language and laws, or with respect to language and laws, we'll put that in the ablative case. And that's a special use of the ablative called ablative of specification. So it's not too complicated, really. Let's read the Latin sentence here in section 143. Galli et Belgae lingua et legibus differunt. Okay, the subject here is Galli et Belgae, the Gauls and the Belgians, and the verb here is differunt. Together they say, the Gauls and Belgians differ. Now we have two nouns in the ablative case. We have lingua, notice the macron or macron over the final A there, and legibus, which is the ablative plural form of one of our new words for this lesson, lex, which means law. So the way the sentence will read is, the Gauls and Belgians differ with respect to language and with respect to laws. Okay, not too complicated. That's an example of the ablative case being used in a way called the ablative of specification. Okay, let's turn the page here, and at the top of page 48, you'll see some further explanation. In what respect do the Gauls and Belgians differ? Lingua and legibus, which answer this question, are called ablatives of specification. And then the rule is given yet again in section 144. Okay, let's move on now to section 145 and work on our translation exercises for this lesson. So turn the recording off, try the exercises on your own, and when you're finished, turn the recording back on and we'll go over them together. Okay, hopefully by now you've finished your translation. Let's go over the exercises in section 145 together. Number 1 says, apud Helvetios erat princeps orgeterix nomine. Okay, we start out with a prepositional phrase that's apud Helvetios. Apud, the authors of the book have told us to translate it as among, so let's do that. And Helvetios is accusative plural because the preposition apud takes the accusative. So we'll translate apud Helvetios as among the Helvetii. Erat is a form of sum, the verb of being. It's imperfect tense, third person singular. So we can just translate it as was. And princeps is one of our new words for this lesson. It means chief. So far we have this. Among the Helvetii was a chief. Now the word nomine is the third declension noun nomen, which means name, and it's in the ablative singular. This is a very common thing to see in Latin. it's just saying by the name of or with the name. And then the name Orgetorix is here. I suppose that if you wanted to categorize it somehow, you could say it's an ablative of manner, or maybe ablative of description. I don't know if that's fully correct or not. But anyway, it just simply means by the name of or with the name, and then you have the name here, Orgetorix. So number 1 will say, among the Helvetii was a chief by the name Orgetorix, or with the name Orgetorix. Number 2 is next, auctoritas Orgetorigas erat magna. Okay, the subject of the sentence is auctoritas, which means influence. That's one of our new nouns for this lesson. And then we have Orgetorigas. That's a genitive singular possessing auctoritas. That's the name Orgetorix, but in the genitive singular. So we'll translate these first 2 words as the influence of Orgetorix, and then erat magna says was great. So number 2 says the influence of Orgetorix was great. Number 3 is next, ad civitates mitebatur. The verb here is mitebatur. That's a form of the verb mito, which means send. In this case, it's imperfect tense, third person singular, and it's also passive. So we can translate it as he, she, or it was being sent. Ad civitates means to the states. Civitates is one of our new nouns for this lesson. It's the noun civitas, which can mean state or tribe. So we can translate number 3 as he, she, or it was being sent to the tribes, or he, she, or it was being sent to the states. Number 4 is next. Cum civitatibus pacem et amicitiam confirmabat. Okay, there's no word here. There's no separate noun to be the subject. So we'll just have to use the pronoun that's included in confirmabat. That's a form of the verb confirmo, which means to strengthen or affirm. And it's third person singular, imperfect tense. So we'll translate confirmabat as he, she, or it was strengthening, or he, she, or it was affirming. And what was he, she, or it affirming or strengthening? Peace and friendship. That's pacem et amicitiam. Okay, pacem is the accusative singular form of pax, one of our new third declension nouns for this lesson, which means peace. Amicitia is a first declension noun that means friendship. Here it's also in the accusative case. Cum civitatibus means with the tribes or with the states. Notice that cum here takes the ablative, and civitatibus is ablative plural from the third declension. So number 4 says, he, she, or it was strengthening peace and friendship with the tribes or with the states. Number 5 is next. Militum magnum numerum habebat. Okay, the verb here is habebat. That's a form of the verb habeo, which means have. Here it's imperfect tense, third person singular. So we'll translate it as he, she, or it was having. For the sake of convenience, we can just say he, she, or it had. The direct object here is magnum numerum. That's a great number. Both of those words are accusative singular. And militum is genitive plural, and it's possessing the magnum numerum. Okay? Notice the um ending at the end of the word militum. That's really the word miles, which means soldier, and it's from the third declension. So when you see that um ending for a third declension noun, that's genitive plural. So number 5 says, he, she, or it had a great number of soldiers. Number 6 is next. Milites conveniebant. Okay, there's a footnote here. It tells us about the verb conveniebant. It's really the verb venio, which means come, with a special prefix, a prepositional prefix, con, which means together. So con and winio together say to come together. Okay? The subject here is milites. That's the noun miles from the third declension, and it's nominative plural. So milites is the subject, and it says soldiers, or the soldiers. And then conveniebant says we're coming together. That's imperfect tense, third person plural. So number 6 says the soldiers were coming together. Or you could say also the soldiers were assembling. Okay, number 7 is next. Legatos ad dumnorigem haiduum mitebant. Okay, let's examine the subject and verb here. The subject of the sentence, well, there isn't one really. There's no separate noun to be the subject of the sentence. Instead, we just have to use the pronoun included in the main verb, which is the verb mitebant. That's a form of the verb mito, which means send, and it's imperfect tense, third person, plural. So mitebant says they were sending, so we'll use they as the subject, and then legatos is the direct object. That's the word legatus, a masculine noun of the second declension. And the word legatus, as I explained in a past lesson, means someone who's chosen to represent you in your place. And the way that plays out is it can mean an envoy, like a diplomat you send to do diplomatic work in your place, in your stead. And it can also mean a high-ranking general. For example, Caesar, as commander-in-chief, he may have someone to run the army when he's not there. That is a person that he's selected to run the place in his stead or in his place. So a legatus, someone who's chosen to take your place, that can manifest itself as an envoy, a diplomat, or as a high-ranking general. Here it's a diplomat or envoy. So we'll translate mitebant and legatos as they were sending envoys. And now we have ad dumnorigem, which means to dumnorix. That's a person. Dumnorigem is accusative singular. And we have another accusative noun standing in apposition with it, and that is the noun haiduum. And that means a Haiduin, a member of the tribe of the Haidui. Okay, so number 7 will read like this. They were sending envoys to Dumnorix the Haiduin. Number 8 is next. Caesar principes Haiduorum quorum magnam copiam in castris habebat convocabat. Okay, first, let's examine the subject and verb. We have Caesar and we have convocabant. And that says, Caesar was calling together. Okay, convocabant is imperfect tense, third person singular, and it means to call together. So the main subject and main verb are Caesar was calling together. In the middle of the sentence, we have a relative clause. That's the part that says, quorum magnam copiam in castris habebat. So for now, we're not going to translate that. Instead, let's translate just the main clause. So what we have is Caesar was calling together, and then we have a direct object, principes, that's the chiefs, and then we have haiduorum, that's genitive plural, and it means of the haidui. So the main clause says Caesar was calling together the chiefs of the haidui. Now we have a relative clause starting with a relative pronoun. And quorum is the relative pronoun. Notice that the ending of quorum is O-R-U-M. And if you think that that is genitive plural, you are correct. So quorum means of whom. Okay? It's a relative pronoun that means who or which, but it's genitive, so it has the idea of whom. Okay? Within the relative clause, habebat is the verb. That's the verb habeo, which means have, and it's third person singular imperfect tense. The subject of it is Caesar, and the direct object is magnam copiam. That means a great supply or great abundance. In castris means in the camp. Okay? Here the preposition in is taking the ablative case. So our relative clause reads like this: of whom he had a great supply in the camp. So the idea here is that Caesar had in his camp many of the chiefs of the Haidui tribe, okay? And now he's calling them together. He wants to have a meeting with them or an assembly. So number 8 reads like this: Caesar was calling together the chiefs of the Haidui, of whom he had a great number in the camp. I know that here in this exercise we have a relative clause which I have not really fully explained. In future lessons we're going to delve much more deeply into relative clauses, but for now, just translate quorum as they ask you to in the footnote. Again, as I mentioned, in the future we're going to go very, very in-depth on relative clauses. But for now, just be satisfied with the knowledge that quorum is genitive plural, so it means of whom. And we'll talk more about this later. In the meantime, let's move on to number 9. Number 9 says, numerus capitum erat decem. The first word here, numerus, means number, and that's the subject of the sentence. And then we have the word capitum. That's a form of the third declension noun caput, which means head, okay? So caput, capitis. Capitis is the genitive singular form. If you want to make it genitive plural, you add um to the genitive stem. That gives you capitum. So numerus capitum says the number of heads. Erat means was, and decem simply means 10. That's the number 10. So number 9 is actually quite simple. The number of heads was 10. Number 10 is next. Videmus capita equorum. Okay, the verb here is videmus. That means we see. It's present tense and first person plural. Capita is the direct object. As I mentioned a moment ago, the third declension noun caput means head. It is a neuter noun, so regardless of what declension it comes from, it's still going to have the letter A as its ending in the nominative plural and accusative plural. Remember the two big rules of neuter nouns. Number 1, the nominative plural will always end with the letter A, no matter what declension it's from. Number 2, the nominative forms and accusative forms will always be the same. Okay, so capita here is accusative plural. So videmus and capita together say, we see the heads. And then equorum is genitive plural. That means of the horses. That's from the second declension noun equus, which means horse. So number 10 says, we see the heads of the horses. Number 11 is next. Helvetii reliquos gallos virtute praecedunt. Okay, the subject here is Helvetii, and the verb is praecedunt. Praecedunt is really a compound verb. It's the preposition prae, which means before, and the verb cedo, which means go, move, things like that. So literally it means to go before, to precede. Okay? And because it means precede, it has the idea of excelling, being better than someone else. So the subject and verb together say the Helvetii go before, or the Helvetii precede, or the Helvetii excel. And who do they excel? The reliquos gallos, That's the remaining galls, the rest of the galls. I personally prefer the rest of the galls. I think that captures the what it's actually saying best. And then we have one last word here, virtute. That's the third declension noun, virtus, which means manliness or valor. Okay? And this is ablative singular, and it's what we call the ablative of specification. Okay? So the Helvetii excel the rest of the galls with respect to valor or in valor. So here, virtute is an ablative of specification. It's telling you, it's specifying just exactly in what way the Helvetii excel the other galls. Number 12 is next. Pilum et gladius erant militi. Okay, in this exercise, we are reviewing a special thing called the dative of possession. Okay, if you want to say that someone has something in Latin, of course you can use the verb habeo, which means have, but there's another way to do it called dative of possession. You can say there is to someone something. Okay, if I say there is to me a horse, if I say that in Latin, that's saying I have a horse. And the to me part, you would put in the dative case. And that's what's happening here with erant and militi. Militi is dative singular. That's a form of the third declension noun miles, which means soldier. So militi means to the soldier, and erant is there were. So there were to the soldier, dative of possession, a pilum and a gladium. That means a javelin and a sword. Okay, so literally, a javelin and a sword were to the soldier. But a nicer sounding translation is the soldier had a javelin and a sword. Okay, that brings us to the end of another installment of Lenny's Latin class. And as always, I'm reminding you to speak the language. You can go through the vocabulary list for this lesson, and you can make up sentences with them. You can go through the translation exercises and get ideas there for things you could say. And once you get ideas of things you can say, then mentally change things around and start to say the sentences in different ways for practice, okay? You could keep it simple. You could use the verb habeo and the noun lex. You could say habeo legem. I have a law. Habemus legem. We have a law. Habemus pacem. We have peace. Okay, you could put together civitas and princeps and say civitas habet principem. The state has a chief, or the tribe has a chief. You could use people's names. Dumnorix est princeps. Dumnorix is the chief. You could use the dative of possession and say pax non est nobis. Peace is not to us. In other words, we don't have peace. Okay, so those are just a few quick examples of how you can make up sentences using the new vocabulary for this lesson. Okay? So it's important that you practice Latin verbally so that you can begin to control the grammar and you can begin to control all the different forms and verb forms and noun forms and make up your own sentences. That's going to give you greater mastery over the material. And as I've said in previous lectures, that kind of thing will give you an active knowledge of Latin instead of just a passive knowledge. Okay, so keep practicing, and we will see you in the next lesson.